Hi everybody, welcome to another Spectrum Economic video. Today we're still going to be on the topic of scarcity. This time we're on part 5 and this is our final part to the series. So what I'm going to do now is just going to give you a quick recap of the first 4 parts for those who maybe can't remember what I covered, or for those that haven't watched them yet, though I strongly recommend that you actually go back and watch those 4 parts. Of course, watch this one first and then go back and watch the other 4. And then, hey, watch this one again if you want. But okay, so here's a quick summary. So in part 1, we looked at the definition of scarcity. So scarcity occurs when you have too many people chasing too few goods. So in effect, there's not enough to go around for everybody. And I demonstrated that with a simple example of 4 people on an island. One person has something they wanted to sell, and you've got another 3 people competing for that. So what happens is the person sells it to one of the 3, so the person selling and the person buying end up okay, but you've got 2 people that lose out who don't get it simply because there's not enough to go around. And that is what you get with scarcity. You always end up with people losing out, or potentially even everybody losing out. I went to part 2. Here I will define 2 concepts. Natural scarcity, which is scarcity that just occurs simply because there isn't enough to go around, which is like the typical definition of scarcity. And there's also contrived scarcity, when there actually is enough to go around, but simply because manipulation through various reasons, like people own factors of production being a big one, limit the supply of resources, so making more people to compete for it. So you've got certain people hoarding resources. That could be very wealthy people, it could be large companies, or it could be the government. I then, in part 3, I looked at factors of production. I focused almost purely on land, and I looked at it from the perspective of the meat and dairy industry and the amount of land wastage used by both of those. In fact, an omnivore diet takes up 18 times more land than a vegan diet. In part 4, I looked at the remaining 3 factors of production: labour, capital, entrepreneurship. I gave various examples of the efficiency of labour in regards to working with capital. The 2 work very closely together. Also gave examples of how that efficiency is being exploited and how a lot of that money is actually going to the rich, the big companies, back to the owners of the factors of production again. So that's sort of something that's been pushed throughout this whole video series. Alright, so now in part 5, I'm going to do a bit of a summary and also going to talk about some possible solutions. So first up, does scarcity actually exist? So this is a question I posed at the end of part 1. So from what we've seen, there is certainly evidence that scarcity exists. There's also evidence that maybe it doesn't exist. But what it comes down to, what form does it exist? Does it have to exist? And that's where we talk about contrived scarcity. And most of the scarcity we've talked about comes back to contrived scarcity. And why, for example, does it occur? Like, for example, we go back to the vegan diet. There's a very small percentage of people that are vegans. Less than 5% in almost every country. There's a few countries, I think India is up to like 30%. That's pretty high, and it's increasing in a lot of other countries. So why is that the case? You have various reasons. Like, vegans are generally mocked by the media, as part of what they call a cult. You're a vegan, you're a bit also as well, the benefits of meat and dairy are constantly promoted. Like, take for example here, governments are constantly claiming that milk is good for you. As you can see from these adverts here. In fact, it's not. It's a lie. They talk about calcium. There's so many other things you can get more calcium than you can get out of a glass of milk. There's alternative milks that are better for you. And there's also links between milk and cancer. Also milk and allergies. So there's a lot of campaigning done by the government to promote people to stay with milk, not to become vegan. And it's because the dairy industry is big, and government again put a lot of money into that through subsidies. So as long as the government keeps subsidizing their industry and they keep promoting their industry, and dairy is kept reasonably cheap because of these subsidies and because of the mistreatment of animals, again cost-cutting, people are not going to want to switch to alternative milks because they cost more. So what we do is instead we educate them on things such as the damage to the environment. We educate them on terms of the cruelty. And a lot of people that I met, once they see how cruel it is and once they see the damage that's being caused, even though it's a bit more to buy your almond milk, a bit more to buy your soy milk or your rice milk, they make the switch. Because I think at heart, generally most people are decent. They understand the you shouldn't be destroying the environment and you shouldn't be causing cruelty. But it's getting that message out there. So about scarcity in terms of food, that's interesting when we talk about veganism again. 1 in 7 people in the world are hungry. 1/3 of the food is wasted. Even though 18 times more land is being used than it should be because of an omnivore diet, 1/3 of what is produced is still being wasted. And on top of that, you also have, I think, about 1 in 7 people that are obese, or at least overweight. So you have people overeating, wasting, and wastage of land, and therefore you're getting people that are hungry. When there's more than enough food to go around, even with the land wastage. Imagine if we have vegan diets and we weren't wasting food as well. There is so much food to go around. We don't need to cut the population. We don't need to follow the Georgia Guidestones. We don't need to go down to 500 million people. We could have as many as 20 billion people and I'm sure there will be enough food to go around. Let's just have a look at in terms of the distribution of wealth, the distribution of consumption. Did you know the 20% richest people consume 76.6% of the world's resources? And that was back in 2005, I think, or back in 2005. It's actually got worse since then. The 1% of the world that's wealthiest owns more, what is that, in terms of household wealth, sorry, 1% of the richest own more than 50% of the poorest, I believe, or average 50%, not 100% sure. But anyway, however you look at that, that's an appalling stat. You've got 1% richer than 50%. It's, you know, the distribution of wealth is completely uneven. 62 really rich people, so 62 richest people in the world, have more wealth than 3.5 billion of the poorest. Just 62 have more wealth than 3.5 billion of the poorest. Let's give you a moment for that to sink in. As you can understand here, this is control of wealth, and the wealth is used to control our factors of production, ownership of capital, ownership of land. And that is what is creating our scarcity. It's quite shocking when you think about it, that there's so much wealth held by just a few. And then they're exploiting that power so that, you know, the rest of us have to suffer, the rest of us have to compete for what's left, when we shouldn't have to. So what can we do about it? Well, economists generally say, hey, it's our insatiable needs and wants, right? We always want more and more and more. There's not an awful lot we can do about it. Other people would say let's educate the people. Agree to a certain extent. Others say technology. What's great is that actually our technology is increasing. Our technology has increased so much over the last 100 years. It's amazing. We are so much more productive because of that technology. And that should have translated into less working hours. If you're 5 times more productive, shouldn't you be working 5 times less? Or maybe even half that amount of time if, okay, you want to improve your standard of living in other areas and you're willing to work a bit more. But why is it we're working the same number of hours? In fact, in terms of a household, we're actually working more hours because you now got 2-parent families where you have both parents working. So something doesn't seem quite right, does it? So what can we do about it? First thing, and in my opinion, what I did was I found out more information. You need to go out there and you need to find the truth. You can do various research online, you can watch videos, you can go to conferences. What's a great thing is you actually talk to other people that have a different perspective. Because there's reasons why people have different perspectives and it's worth listening to that. Even if you think they're wrong, usually there's an element of truth in almost everything that someone says. You know, there's some element. It may be just a small element of truth, but there generally is. So you've got to pick out on that. And you talk to more people, you get greater exposure. What's good as well, once you've got that knowledge, and I talk about learning should be an ongoing thing. You do all the time, you never stop learning, you never stop gathering information. Once you've got to a point where you think you've got enough information, then I think it's somewhat our responsibility to spread that information. And there's a lot of great stuff going on YouTube. There's a lot of good things coming out of alternative media. Unfortunately, because of censorship on YouTube, a lot of that stuff's starting to get buried. As you can understand, YouTube's owned by Google. What is Google? A very, very big company, so maybe it's not in their best interest if people get this alternative news, this alternative information. So if you think Google is, you know, if YouTube's not up to it, then I suggest you go on Steemit. That's what I've been using a lot recently, and I put up a lot of my videos on Steemit as well, whether it's links to YouTube or using their new function DTube. So Steemit is very good, it's got lots of articles in there. And the people there are very open as well, so you'll be able to get your point across as well. So that's great. How about we get active, we get out there, and we just participate in the world. So this is going one step further than just making videos and writing posts. Actually engaging in activism. So what do I mean by activism? I mean, you could go and join an activist group. You can go and join, like, for example, Anonymous. You can go and join a rally. You can go and join a protest, like you can see in this video here. It's about getting out there. It's about reaching the people on a personal level, which you can't really do just with YouTube and just with things like Steemit. So it's also meeting other people, like-minded people, and you share ideas in that environment, and it brings the message a lot closer to home. And this is where I was at World Vegan Day, and there are a lot of people there participating in World Vegan Day, and there's here this video that was part of a protest the day before World Vegan Day. And you can join other things as well. You can even sign petitions and stuff is another way of getting involved. But to remain active is a good step forward, is to get the message out there. And you'd be surprised, it's like a ripple. Information just spreads, and people eventually get the message, and the ones that don't, well, eventually they get surrounded by more and more people that do, and eventually you can hope that they will as well. But being an activist, just knowing a lot of information, it's great, but that alone still isn't enough if we're going to make a change. If you want to make a change, you've got to live that change yourself. There's no point going up on stage and say, you must do this, we do that, see this terrible thing in the world, that cow over there is dying, there's famine when there shouldn't be, but your everyday lifestyle doesn't change. And if that's the case, then we're not going to get far, because that's what you need to do. You've got to live what you preach. You've got to be able to stand up for what you believe in, and you've got to live it. And after you've done all that, you probably won't see anything happen. There'll be almost no change, and it's like, oh, so it didn't work. Not necessarily. Sometimes you just got to be patient. You've got to wait, and you've got to be persistent. If it doesn't work, you keep going, And you can look at new ways of doing things. You can change things up, find different ways of reaching people. Find what appeals to people. Different things appeal to different people, and you need different strategies to appeal to different people. So you just got to be persistent and keep at it, and eventually you'll see results. It's like a game of chess. You've got to think about each move. You've got to take your time, unless it's a lightning chess game. But anyway, it's just an example that it's persistence and patience is important. And at the end of the day, you may be a few years away, maybe 5 years, 10 years, you'll start seeing change. Everybody's seeing some change. They look at Brexit. Britain stood up and they voted to get out of the European Union. That's great, you're breaking down the block. That is something, that is a change. And we saw in America with the election of Donald Trump. Okay, you may not see it as a good thing, but it was people saying that they've had enough of the establishment. And Donald Trump was a representation of someone who appeared to be anti-establishment. I know in fact he isn't, and he's just as bad as all the others, but at least people were standing up for that. And it's an indication that we are moving in the right direction. We may fail a little bit at first, but it's one step at a time, and I think the future can be very bright as long as we keep working. Like, look at veganism. It's increased so much over the last 5 years. It's amazing. It may still be very small, but if 1% can turn into 2%, then 3%, then maybe 5%, ends up at 10%, and then you start to get a critical mass, you will see changes in the world. But be prepared. As progress is made, the establishment are not just going to sit back and just let us roll in. They're going to fight back as hard and as strong as they possibly can. So be prepared for unpleasant things. Be prepared for false flag operations. Be prepared for terrorist acts. Be prepared for more surveillance. Be prepared for new laws and new regulations and new restrictions. They won't roll over. They've had power for a long time. Like I said, persistence, perseverance, and just be creative about how you go with it. And it's a battle that we can win. Alright, that takes me to the end of part 5. I think my take on scarcity is a little bit different from what you're going to see out of your textbook. haven't focused on purely on people's needs and wants and people wanting more and more and more. I haven't focused on the world never has enough, because I believe that the world has enough. And the main problem is contrived scarcity. Scarcity that exists because others are restricting access to key resources. Others are hoarding wealth and power for themselves. Thank you very much for watching this series. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the video, click the like button. You can go to Steam it. I've actually written up these various versions of these videos, you might say, in post format, so you have a look at that. I've got photos in there and stuff like that, some interesting memes, some of the stuff you saw in the slides. So just go and check that out on Steam it. If you want to see more videos, or if you want to go back and look at some of my older stuff, remember to hit the subscribe button. I generally pump out videos on a reasonably regular basis, so you can come back and have a look at that, and I'll have another series running fairly soon. I've got other stuff relating to microeconomics, macroeconomics, cost-benefit analysis, and the work I'm doing on veganism, vegan economics. So again, if you want to see those, subscribe, and I think you'll be informed when those videos come out. Anyway, thank you for watching my scarcity series, and hopefully I'll be seeing more of you soon. Bye-bye.